Professor Singer, do you see this...
If you're talking about the issue at East Anglia University, that's a very sad story. It really is tragic, I think. It means that as a result of this, the public is going to lose confidence in science. Science will be hurt, and inevitably all of us will suffer. Now, I must tell you that I have a little bit of personal sympathy for the people involved because they've worked very hard for very long to do a job. However, I don't condone what they've done, which is to try to evade any criticism, to hide their data, to keep from being contradicted. In other words, they've done everything possible in order to stop any kind of criticism. That's not how science works. That's terrible.
That's a very serious accusation.
It's a very serious accusation. First, they don't own all the data. They're trying to make it available so all other scientists can analyze it. But this data is actually owned by the meteorological offices around the world. Today, they're trying to get permission to release all the data. But independent of this particular data...
I don't agree.
Independent of this particular data set...
I think we must have an investigation. We must have a proper investigation and establish exactly what happened.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Accept the fact.
All right, hang on a second, Professor Singer. It's a fair enough call to have an investigation to establish what happened, isn't it? I
agree completely. We should try an investigation of how is it illegally hacked into, and then a complete disclosure of all the information, so we can see, was it appropriate analysis of the data or not. Secondly, the point is, there are independent data sets in the United States, both in NASA and in NOAA, that show exactly the same trends as this information.
Professor Singer, you can briefly have the last word.
Well, I'm not arguing about the details of what they show. I'm actually arguing about their actions, which have been to try to prevent anyone from having access to the data, to counteract the Freedom of Information Act, and to do various things that are contrary to the way science operates. They have contradicted the principle of openness and transparency. I think it's up to the British authorities, because this is an operation supported by British tax money. Right. It's really not my business.
Okay, all right. In that case, I think we'll leave it there.
So is global warming fact or fiction? Let's get to a debate. John Christie is professor of atmospheric science at the University of Alabama, Huntsville, and Gavin Schmidt is a climate scientist at the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies. Gentlemen, thanks very much for coming in. John Christie, you're a skeptic. You disagree with Al Gore. The disappearance, as he says, of the polar ice cap, how do you explain that? Gavin, Tom Friedman, who obviously agrees with you, he wrote this in the New York Times on this email, these emails that were leaked, what's called ClimateGate. He wrote this, even though he strongly agrees with you. If we don't prepare and climate change turns out to be real, life on this planet could become a living hell, and that's why I'm for doing the Cheney thing on climate, preparing for 1%. But he does go on to say he was very upset about those leaked emails. He says, frankly, I found it very disturbing to read a leading climate scientist writing that he used a, quote, trick to, quote, hide a putative decline in temperatures or was keeping the contradictory research from getting a proper hearing. A lot of people are outraged when they go back 10 years and read that and believe that legitimate scientists were trying to suppress other information.
Well, that's just not true. The words that you've quoted there out of context, if read in the proper context, the trick is just meaning a technique. It's just a way of doing a smooth when you've got a time series that ends in the middle of where you want to do the smooth. It's nothing nefarious. It's nothing sneaky. The decline that they were talking about was in some tree ring records.
Let me interrupt for a second, Gavin, because I take it the individual, the scholar at the head of this institute at East Anglia University has now stepped down because of all of this.
Well, he stepped aside while the university is looking into these things, and I think that's perfectly appropriate. People should be able to investigate these things outside of the media storm that's been created over these emails. And let me tell you, if you had had 13 years of your emails poured over by people who are extremely hostile to you, I don't think anybody would survive that unscathed. And this has been very devastating for the people involved, and it's a huge invasion of their privacy. And I don't think we should forget that these emails were stolen. These are not government employees. These are not things that were released under a Freedom of Information Act. These were emails hacked from a mail server at their university and released completely illegally. I don't think that that is something that you should be encouraging, and I don't think that anybody here would really want that even to happen to their worst enemy.
Let's let John Christie respond to that.
Well, as someone who was derided in many of those emails, I just completely disagree with what Gavin has just said. When they say hide the decline, that's exactly what they were trying to do. It even is in the computer code. I think what this shows, in my view,
wrong, John. That's not
is
true.
that I think what this shows, in my view, is that our ignorance of the climate system is enormous, and our policymakers need to know about that.
Our ignorance about climate system is very large, but we do know some things. We do know that greenhouse gases are increasing because of human activity. We do know that the planet is warming. We do know that it's warming for the reasons that basic physics tells us that it's warming. There are lots of details and lots of issues that we still need to work on. Obviously, we're all scientists and we're working on the things that are uncertain. No scientist makes a living by going around agreeing with everybody else's work. We are looking for the places where there is uncertainty. That's where scientists look. But when you do that, you can't forget that science is built on a foundation that goes back to the 19th century. The shape of that building, the whole edifice is not being changed because people are arguing about one or two bricks at the top and which temperature record is the best temperature record or not.
Let me just wrap it up because we're out of time. Very quickly, John Christie, I'll go back to the first question I asked you, the disappearance of the polar ice cap. How do you explain that?
Well, the North Pole has warmed in recent years, as I've said, but when we look at the entire climate system, there is so much, not just details, huge uncertainties about how the climate system reacts, and no one can prove that greenhouse gases, the extra greenhouse gases we are putting in the atmosphere, is causing all of it or part of it.
We'll leave it on that note, but hopefully we'll continue this discussion because the subject is not going away. The President will be in Copenhagen next week at this international global warming climate change conference. Appreciate it very much, John Christie and Gavin Schmidt.